Hi guys, and welcome back to my channel. And in today's episode we will be continuing our petting zoo section, and in this episode we will start another new small little barn, and the first inhabitants will be the Tamworth pig. And I feel like the Tamworth pig is not the most favorable animal from this pack, but honestly the model is pretty good, so I was very excited to finally start building something for them. And yeah, let's get started. So this is the third episode for the petting zoo, and we have already finished one of the big barns, the red big barn for the Highland cattle, the goats and the donkeys. And now we will start another but smaller barn for the Tamworth pig and another animal that will be inside there in the next episode. So for this barn, I definitely wanted to make it look a little bit different than the red barn that I already had, and especially it is much smaller, since the animals that are in there are also smaller and definitely less of those. So I decided to make it smaller, and I tried to make it a different color and maybe a completely different look, as far as you can make it look different, because they are both just barns, so they will have a lot of similarities. But I tried to not copy paste the red big barn, so I firstly decided to choose a different color, and for this one I decided why not make a green barn. Since you might know, I want to make the whole zoo really kid friendly, or not the whole zoo but the petting zoo section. So I want to include a lot of colors in there, which is not really typical for my building style. So I try to keep the colors relatively muted, but still we will have some colors in there, like the red barn, the green barn, and then some other things that are about to come. But yeah, this was the plan, and I also didn't really want to make it as piece heavy as I did the red barn. I feel like I did the red barn excessively piece heavy, so I definitely tried to reduce that with this one. And so I decided to use plastered walls. Actually, I didn't use like wooden walls as I did with the red one, so I chose these solid plaster walls, but you will later see me add still some wooden details, because it just felt like really plain, the look of it. I at first wanted to use these decals where it looks like the brick wall underneath the pilaster is peeking through, but honestly it didn't really look that nice, and since the buildings are not as old, I didn't really want to make them look excessively old or like aged. So yeah, I didn't do that. So, and then I decided to use the wooden panels that you will see me do a little bit later. But other than that, the base structure and also the interior is very similar to the red barn, but I still included it in this video in case you haven't seen my last two episodes. I still used a few of those decal pieces where you can see the like brick wall underneath, to make it look like that the plaster is kind of already like going away, or like a little bit destroyed just from erosion and stuff like that. So I try to use that. You probably can't really see them behind these wooden panels, but I feel like if you still see them, that's like a nice little detail. And then I also use the like gridded pieces from the panels, or for the panels. I normally rarely use gridded pieces, but honestly these were fitting pretty well, and it kept my piece count really low, and it was very easy to use those for this building, and I just felt like it fitted really well, so I just decided to use those instead of making my own panels. And then for the interior, I decided to make two little holding pens that are separated from one another, with also two separate doors leading to the outside habitat, just in case there would be like an animal or two that need to be separated. For example, if one of the pigs is pregnant and is giving birth, so it can be separated from the other pigs, or maybe like a sick animal, some animal that is not supposed to move too much because of an injury, for example. So I have two doors and two little holding pens for the animals, for the pigs, and also the other animals that are coming to the other side of this little barn. And of course, I used a lot of decals on the lower part of the wall, simply because a barn is typically not the most clean like environment, or not really like an environment, but the animals of course get everything dirty, especially if the pigs are like playing in the mud outside, and they come in and they just make everything dirty. So of course I use a lot of decals, and just this little simple detail just adds so much more of realism into this building. So that's something that I definitely can recommend to everyone who's trying to aim for more realism, to use a lot of decals, especially the moss decal. You can recolor it to this brownish color to make it look like dirt. And then we also have these like concrete dirty decals, and I also use these a lot. I sometimes honestly forget to use them, but when I remember, I always use a ton of those, because they're just really versatile. You can use them for a lot of things, and it just makes like walls and also grounds, like a concrete floor, not as plain as they would be without those decals. And for the doors for this barn, I use my own blueprint that you can also find on the Steam Workshop. And I kind of resized the doors a little bit, since the openings for the animals in this barn are definitely smaller but wider. So I kind of had to readjust the size of the doors, but other than that, it's basically the same door. And as I said, you can download them on the Steam Workshop, and you can really easily size them to your own needs. And after adding the roof, the barn itself is basically finished. Of course, I later did the interior. I didn't really show anything of the interior because I used just a few like props to put in this little hallway between the both holding pens on both sides, for the pig and then for the other animal. And so I basically just added a few props to make it look a little bit more alive within this barn and a little bit more use. And that was basically it for the barn. And then when it came to building the actual habitat, I knew very quickly, basically from the beginning of this build, that I wanted to add a little mud pit for the pigs, where the guests would have like a little bit of a higher viewing gallery where they can look down on the pigs like playing in the mud. And when I was looking at the habitat tab, what the pigs can use for enrichment items, I honestly was a little shocked when the mud like enrichment piece didn't come up when I was looking for the Tamworth pig, or for the items that are used by the Tamworth pig. And I was like very confused why the mud pit is not for the Tamworth pig. I was like, it makes so much sense that a pig is going to use the mud pit, and then it's not under their name. Like if I was searching for the pig, it didn't came up, so I decided to still use them in the mud pit because I just really enjoy the texture of it. And then a little bit later, I did obviously put down pigs within the habitat, and then I saw that the pigs can use the mud pit. So I was a little bit relieved. I still didn't really see them use the mud pit though. I don't know why. I don't know if I just got unlucky that I didn't get to see them actually use it. But when it comes to the traversable area, they can use it. So I hope they will also really interact with it, because as I said, since now I haven't really seen them do so. But yeah, that was a little bit confusing. I don't know if they maybe just forgot to add the habitat item to the pig. I'm not quite sure, but yeah, just as a little information for you if you were wondering if it works or not, or if you couldn't find it. They should be able to use it, but as I said, I sadly didn't see actually them interacting with this piece, so I really hope that they can. But otherwise, that the Tamworth pig actually plays in the water. You will see that in the cinematic shots later, that they will actually like roll around in the water. So even if they are not using the mud pit itself, they will still use it in the water, and that is honestly really cool that they added that, that they don't only do this in a enrichment item but also in normal water. Also, the look of them then later looking a little bit dirty and muddy. So the fur basically, it's such a nice little detail. I really loved that when I saw that they look a little bit muddy afterwards. That's just a cute little detail that Frontier added there. Then for the little overview that the guests have over the mud pit, I first started with normal concrete, but it felt like really plain. I didn't really like the look of it, so I tried to use the tropical stones that we got from the tropical pack, and I really like the look of it. Them looking a little bit mossy on the edges is a really nice detail, since the mud pit is always moist, and moss just loves moisture. It's just perfect, and I really love that, so I used the other stones. It just gives a little bit of a different look and texture. And then of course later I also added more decals around there, because the pigs will wallow in there and of course get everything dirty as they do so. Then in the corners, I wanted to add plant beds. I will add plants and bushes a little bit later on in this video, simply because the habitat itself is relatively like a lot of soil and dirt and mud and stuff like that. So there isn't a lot of greenery. I thought that the Tamworth pig would probably eat a lot of the foliage that would be in there. So I tried to not use as much, to not make it look too lush, because over time the pigs would just eat everything. So I decided to keep it relatively earthy and muddy, and then I wanted to add some green speckles around the whole habitat. So I added these little planters so that also the habitat is not like accessible for the guests all around the barrier, but just in certain areas where the guest is supposed to come up to the pig. Like on the edges, there are a few like little gaps where the guest can actually come up to the fence and possibly also pet the pig if it wanted to, and it could just come up to the fence and then get pet by the guests. And then they of course have this little overview over the mud pit where they can see the pigs playing around in the habitat. And since I didn't plan on using a lot of greenery within this habitat, I decided to use these logs. These are from the Steam workshop, so I didn't do them myself. And I really like the look of it, just like something completely different than what we have in the game. And I really enjoyed those, so I decided to use them within this habitat to make it a little bit more interesting and less plain. And then for the fences where the guest is not able to reach and where it's just a little bit in the background, I wanted to use a really simple regular mesh fence that I did on my own. I at first, as you can see, also used this hanging cloth that we have. I thought about adding a little bit more coverage, but at the end I didn't really like the look of the cloth on the fence, so I just removed it, but kept the fence itself the way I already had it, and just added more greenery to the back of the fence to have more coverage. And then of course I also did a custom entry for the staff to enter the habitat. I normally try to incorporate the normal habitat barrier like door for the staff to add it within the build itself. But in the last couple of habitats I tried to do it differently, and I tried to just hide the actual door for the staff somewhere in the back in some foliage or in a barrier itself. And I just did a custom door for them that just looked better, because I most of the time don't really like the look of the doors for the habitat barriers that we have. They are just really specific looks, and you mostly can't really match them to your own building, and it often looks a little bit off. Sometimes I can make it work to incorporate it, but with this one, for example, we don't really have a mesh door, like a normal fence mesh door. We only have like the glass, the really thick metal doors, and then the wooden doors. So yeah, it just didn't fit with my last habitat, so I just decided to hide them somewhere. And honestly, I really like that. Normally, as I said, I try to aim for as much of a realism as possible, and also try to make the paths for the staff and the guests as realistic as possible, so that the staff is actually going through the door where they are supposed to walk through. But this is just so much simpler and easier to do, so I might stick to this technique. Maybe sometimes I will try to incorporate it, but yeah, I just like it currently the way that I do it. And as you have seen, I also added this cloth over the mud pit to give the pigs more coverage from the sun, so that they don't burn themselves in the high summers, and that they can have like this really cool area where they can wallow in and just chill in, especially during the hot summer times. And this one is actually also a blueprint from the workshop. It is by Leader, and I really love the sun sails. We don't really have any big cloths in the game itself, so I really enjoyed using these when I try to use some sun coverage for the animals. Then the poles for this cloth are actually partially a in-game piece. So the big pole with the little metal hook on the tip is actually an in-game piece, but Leader kind of improved it a little bit with a few more details, and they just look really awesome. So I really enjoy using those. And similar to the goats habitat that I already did, I added these little metal huts for the pigs. Sadly, they cannot use it. The pig itself is definitely small enough to technically fit in there, but the traversable area just doesn't let them go in there, which is like really sad, because I would have loved for them to be able to go in there. I think you could possibly make them bigger to make them also usable for the pigs, but then they would look a little bit like excessively big. The pig should be able to comfortably lay in these, but yeah, the traversable area is not the best, but I still use them because I've seen them a lot when I was looking up for inspiration, where they had this little triangular metal huts or like half round metal huts, and I really loved using these. I just think they look super realistic. They're really easy to make, but you can also download them from the Steam Workshop. I did them myself. I have this little Barnyard Habitat Essential Pack that I did when I was doing the very first habitat, and there are a couple of pieces for the barnyard animals, like some huts and sheds, and then are also feeders and water trays and some climbing frames for the goats. If you haven't checked out my workshop, I am trying to be definitely more active on the Steam workshop currently. So I try to do a lot of like building packs for different pieces. For example, the Barnyard Essential pack, then the barn doors, I added them to the Steam workshop too. Then I will possibly also do some barnyard fences at some point when I did more during this episode, or not this episode, but the whole petting zoo episodes. And I will also upload all of the habitats. For example, I also uploaded the red barn already on the workshop, so you can check that out in your game yourself. And when we finish the second habitat for this green barn, then I will also upload this one to the Steam workshop. So definitely go over and follow me there to stay up to date with all of my workshop items that I will upload during the next weeks and months. And then for the last finishing touches, I used a lot of these pebble piles that you can see me always using in my habitats, especially in this really muddy, dirty habitats. Since I'm not using a lot of grasses, I still want to have some sort of dimension within this habitat, so I always aim for the pebbles then. And of course, I used some dry buffalo grass to have like a little bit of texture on the ground, and then of course also a lot of the leaf litter. And then for the little plant beds that you have seen, I didn't really use any grass there. This was one thing I saw in my last zoo visit. Then in these plant beds there's always like soil and the plants itself, but never really grass. There's like mostly the soil, mulch, and a little bit of leaf litter, but other than that there's not really like any grasses, so I try to use that, and I really love the outcome. It just looks pretty realistic, so that's a little tip that I can give you. And then lastly, I also added this little circular centerpiece in front of the barn. I just thought there was something missing, and just to follow the pathing around there, I tried to use a like circular plant bed with some items from the Barnyard animal pack, and then of course some more plants to add more greenery. And we are almost at the very end of this episode. I hope you enjoyed it and that you loved the way I designed the habitat for the Tamworth pig. If you did, go ahead and like this video and don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss any more videos that are to come. And don't leave this video yet, because there are more cinematics to come now. So enjoy the cinematics, and I hope to see you in my next episode. Until then, bye guys!